Welcome to the online demonstration of TTworkbench. Test execution. After developing the TTCN3 source code, the generated test cases can be executed. Before execution, the TTCN3 source code has to be compiled into executable Java classes. TTworkbench provides three buttons: the Build, Rebuild, and Validation button. If you have changed only little things, use the Build button to compile only changed modules. Press the Rebuild button to compile all modules from scratch. The Validation button is used to validate the TTCN3 code without generating the executable jar files. Before you can start to execute test cases, it is required to generate a test campaign loader file. The test campaign loader file is an intermediate format written in XML for the execution management. It includes all references of available test cases and module parameters, the parameters the user can change directly at runtime. I have already prepared a test campaign file called zip_test. When you double-click on it, TTworkbench automatically jumps into the execution view and opens up the file in the management perspective. There are several ways to generate a test campaign file. It is possible to generate a default one for all available test cases, or to generate only individual test cases inside a new test campaign file. You can store the configuration you previously defined. Test cases are now available in the execution management. There is a selection of 10 test cases from the terminating endpoint group, where the test system starts to establish calls, and the SUT, System Under Test, answers. When you click on the root directory, you see all available parameters in the Parameters view below. They can be changed individually. At these parameters, you can change the underlying protocols, UDP, TCP, TLS, and include specific IP addresses and domain names for the configuration of the test. In this example, we use loopback IP address 127.0.0.1 because the system under test runs on the same machine as our test system does. We distinguish in two different ports, port 5060 and port 5061. In case your system under test runs on a different machine, just include the correct IP address of the test system and change the IUT IP address parameter to the IP address of the machine the system under test runs on. There are further configuration options for the SIP messages itself. Include the domain name in the request URI, in the from and the to fields. Or register the user agents at the proxy server, if you are running proxy test cases. There are also default timer settings from RFC 3261 that can be changed. In the SIP Messages group, answer questions about checksum usage, for example aka V1, authentication, or if the user agent is required to authenticate at the server. The SDP body for RTP streaming can be changed individually too. In addition to changing parameter values directly in the parameter view, TTworkbench provides a message building system GUI, where required fields can easily be changed. So if you want to change the SDP body, you can do this individually for the required IP address and for the required RTP codec which your system under test understands. After configuring these parameters, let's have a look at the Properties view. You see several statistics. For example, the number of test cases and what kind of test adaptation is being used. Now I start the system under test, in this case a simple IP phone, to test its conformance against the first 10 test cases. All test cases now run, one after the other. Here you see the online graphical logging, which is promptly being generated for the specific test cases. This solution is also being provided in a command line version, enabling you to run regression tests scheduled at a specific time. Let them run overnight and see the results the next morning.